I'd like to call this meeting to order. This is a meeting of the Auburn School Committee, August 26, 2020. And I don't believe we have any citizens' comments or special recognitions. So I would ask for approval of the minutes of 8/19.
Make a motion to approve the minutes of 8/19.
Do I have a second?
A second.
Roll call vote. Dr. McCrillis? Mrs. Harrington?
Yes.
Mrs. Holloway?
Yes.
And Mr. Scobie, yes. It is a vote. We now move on to the superintendent's report. Dr. Hanfield?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As we've discussed in previous meetings, we've been putting together the return to school plan for the Auburn Public Schools for the coming 2021 school year. It's been open for 2 weeks for public review and comment. The the return to school team, met for the final time this past Monday. We feel the document's ready for formal adoption by the school committee, with the understanding that if there are needed changes, we'll make those and bring those to your attention. And as you will see in the acknowledgement page that I added, over 40 people directly impacted the creation of that report. And Dr. Chamberlain and I are extremely grateful for their willingness to give up their Monday afternoons since June to put that document together. So we're very pleased with what's there, and we feel it's going to serve us well in guiding our actions as we get ready to start a new school year safely.
Excellent. I would entertain a motion to accept.
I'll make the motion
I'll
to
make that
accept it.
motion.
Oh, okay.
Go ahead, Jesse.
Sorry. I'll make the motion to accept the Auburn Public Schools return to school plan dated August 26, 2020 as final copy to share.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion on that?
Work to everyone on the committee.
Yeah, I would echo those sentiments as well. It's nice to hear. I mean, when you're talking about 40 different people, I think we're covering all aspects of our school community. So it's really great to have that information and to have that feedback. And I appreciate them giving up their time. It does take a lot to show up every week and discuss the reopening, and you're getting a lot of pressures from people around town as well who know that you're on that committee. So thanks a lot to them. Mrs. Kaufman, we've been seconded on the return to school plan acceptance. So now we are open for discussion. If there's anything that you want to add, basically we have so far just sort of thanked the people on that committee for their hard work, their diligence, and representing the whole school community.
Thank you. No, that's great. Thank you. And I apologize. I wasn't able to get into the meeting for some reason, but.
Well, you haven't missed anything. So
Okay.
yeah, and thank you for being on that committee. Much appreciated.
I wasn't, but I was
Oh, you
on the
weren't?
email about enough people on there.
Oh, I thought you were on the committee.
No.
You seem to be up to speed on everything.
Oh, sorry.
Through the chair, I will say I did acknowledge the members of the school committee, both those who participated and those who did not, because we did have, several members outside of the 40 that met on a regular basis. We had several members of our community also, participate with questions, comments, filling out surveys, whatever it was. So I did highlight the 40 that really had, a lot of direct kind of influence on the document, and then thank the community at large, because, we did get some emails and some things from people in the community that made us go back and rethink something or weigh something against another option or things like that. So, so you are mentioned in there personally for your work as well, because
For driving you crazy?
all of you have read this document and asked questions, and although Return to School team meets on Mondays at 3, we've also discussed this document as a committee, and you also had valuable input into it as well. So, so it was worth, it was worth mentioning all of you in your hard work for that. So I appreciate that.
Thanks.
Thanks a lot. Any other comments or questions? Okay, roll call vote. Dr. McCrillis,
Yes.
Mrs. Harrington,
Yes.
Mrs. Holloway,
Yes.
Mrs. Kaufman,
Yes.
and Mr. Scobie, yes, it is a vote. We now move on to new business.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So as you've probably been hearing across the state, there are many facets to reopening our schools in this current time of crisis with COVID and what have you. I'm pleased to announce that we have reached a tentative agreement. The Auburn Public Schools has reached a tentative agreement with the Auburn Education Association regarding their return to school for the 2020-2021 school year, commencing on August 31st. This, of course, providing that the agreement that I sent you meets with the committee's approval. I'll collect the necessary signatures before the end of the week, as August 31st is Monday. And this is a significant achievement that I think deserves to be recognized. And I'd like to publicly thank the AEA's executive board for their collaboration and truly their sincere desire to get back into the school in a manner that is safe for everyone, as we all understand the importance of getting our kids back into school. And just as a show of solidarity on the AEA's part, this MOA passed 157-5 in their membership. 157-5.
Wow.
That's
It's amazing.
incredibly impressive. And so I thank them all for their work on this over the last few months. A lot of meetings, a lot of phone calls, a lot of emails and things like that. But we have a plan that is here, and both sides are thrilled to have it. So
Excellent. So, yeah, I would just like to thank the faculty as well. I mean, I've said it a million times over. We just have the best, the hardest working and the most caring faculty around. And this is just evidence of that. I mean, those numbers are incredible. I don't think, not that we'll ever know, but I don't think you're going to see those kind of numbers across any of the districts. I really don't. A lot of the districts aren't even, as Dr. Hatfield had mentioned before, are not where we are right now as far as the MOA goes and as far as the back to school plan, and that's in place, and we're ready to go. And as we've admitted to, that there are going to be some bumps in the road, but we are so far ahead of the rest of the pack. And thanks so much to everyone involved in developing these plans, and thanks always to our faculty and staff who, again, always put the children first. And I would entertain a motion to approve. Do I have a second?
Second?
Any further discussion? Okay. All right, so roll call
He
vote.
doesn't count.
Oh, that counts, yeah, that's, Elaine, write that down. That was Gail's comment. Roll call vote, Dr. McCrillis? Mrs. Kaufman?
Yes.
Mrs. Harrington?
Yes.
Mrs. Holloway and Pets? Oh, there we go.
Yes.
And Mr. Scobie, yes, it is a vote. Thank you.
thank you very much. Thank you, everyone. Again, ecstatic to get that done and behind us, and start looking forward to school and talking about educational topics, and getting back to the business of educating our kids. So very excited about that. Next is preschool tuition. The Auburn Integrated Preschool will look a little different this school year, given the recommendations of the Return to School team and the information received from families regarding their preferred learning models. We hope to be able to provide our 3- and 4-year-old students with 5 half-day face-to-face sessions. Students had registered for full-day preschool would also be offered a half-day of remote activities in addition to the half-day of face-to-face learning. Some students will attend in the morning and some in the afternoon, providing ample cleaning time in between sessions. Start and end times are still being determined as we're getting them to work with the high school's times. Additionally, families shared a desire to have a fully remote option, much like the rest of the district, and we feel that we are well positioned to provide that for them. So you will note that we will not offer a full day option for preschool, as there was great concern about preschool lunch and rest time, both seen as activities that could cause greater risk to students and staff. So given all of this information, we're looking to revise the tuition scale for this year only to support our families. And the proposed tuition schedule is there for you. Our 3-year-old 5 half-days would be $2,500. Our 4-year-old 5 half-days would be $2,500. 4-year-old 5 half-days plus 5 half-days of remote learning would be $4,500. And then families seeking full remote learning would be $1,500. So those are decreases across the board. We feel that it's the right move to make for our families, given the difficult financial times that we're in. And we also felt it was important to take the feedback from the Return to School Committee, as well as our preschool parents, and try to put together programming that made sense for them. So we're pleased with this and bring it to you for consideration.
Great. I would entertain that motion.
Make a motion to approve the proposed tuition schedule as presented.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Second.
Any further discussion on that?
Through the chair, how many students are doing the full remote learning for preschool? Just out of curiosity.
We're somewhere, and these numbers are changing on the daily, so I don't exactly quote me on it. But I will say we're probably somewhere into the 10 to 15 range. But again,
Great,
those,
thank you.
but being a month out, you know, those numbers could change up or down a bit. We're going through our town halls. We've had our recorded town halls, I think, as you saw last week. We're going through our live town halls this week, and families have been given through Friday the 28th to make any adjustments to their requests for the coming school year. But we're pretty certain it'll be in that 10 to 15 range.
Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, roll call vote. Dr. McCrellis?
Yeah.
Mrs. Holloway?
Yes.
Mrs. Kaufman?
Yes.
Mrs. Harrington? Mrs. Harrington?
She's frozen.
Oh, and she's
We
out.
lost her.
And she's
Mr. Scobie, yes. That is a vote without Mrs. Harrington.
Let's see if she comes back. So while we're waiting for Mrs. Harrington to come back, perhaps you could get started on this next piece. Recognizing that August is drawing to a close, in the meeting times that we've currently had Wednesdays at 1, with school starting, myself, as well as I know Mr. Scobie will have obligations at that hour. Do we want to reconsider, or do you want to reconsider? I'm just purely putting it out there for your thought and consideration. Do you want to reconsider times of meetings moving forward into September?
The chair, I do feel that if our teachers are back, we should probably start meeting live as well. That's just my thought, just to show support.
I agree. I think that that could be done in a safe manner, not much different than some of the other places that we may go, whether it's a doctor's appointment or other areas where we gather at more than 6 feet apart. If anyone is uncomfortable with that, I'm sure we could figure something out remotely. I certainly don't want to make anyone on the committee uncomfortable, but I do agree with Dr. McCrillis, and I'm ready to start attending meetings in person. And beyond that, I think we could probably go back to a every other week schedule, since we've already sort of worked our way through the process of the MOA and the return to school plan. And anything that came up in between those 2 weeks, we could certainly have unofficial conversation about it, or Dr. Hanfield could with individual members, nothing that needed to be deliberated. So that's my opinion, but I'll open that up to any other discussion. Mr.
Through the
Coughlin.
chair, just anytime after 5 o'clock is going to be much better, just because I have the 9 to 5. So it's just kind of hard to plug it into the workday. So that would be my preference.
All right.
And I'm
Is-
fine with what anybody decides.
Just
And
not
Ms.
8 a.m., right, Gail?
Well, yeah.
So if it were up to me, I think I would ask that we go back to the original school committee schedule as far as time and dates, being every other week, and the 7 o'clock start. It was 7, right? Not 6.
I think it was 7 on, was it Mondays?
No, it was on
Wednesday.
Wednesdays.
7 on Wednesday. Oh, right, Wednesdays. Yep, that's fine.
So, Mrs. Harrington, what we've been discussing in your absence is getting our meetings back on a regular evening schedule, and possibly every other week, and also attending these meetings live at West Street. As Dr. McCrillis put it, in support of our staff, and showing them that, we are one with them, and we will show up to work as well.
I agree with that. I think that's a good plan.
I think there's enough room in the school committee room itself for all of us to space out accordingly, or be spaced out accordingly, however you want to put that. Dr. Hanfield, would you agree?
Yes, I would. Yes, there'd be more than ample space to do that. So yeah, I'm fine with that.
Through the chair, though, how would we actually deal with any additional people that would attend? I think that would be my only concern, because it does get pretty packed, especially, so would it be possible to maybe entertain doing that at the high school or the middle school, just somewhere with a little bit more open space?
Good question.
I mean, we could accommodate anything. We could accommodate anything.
I think that would be my preference, just not to try to do it in the school committee room to start, only until we kind of get our feet wet. There may be some hot button issues as we start down the road of trying to do this hybrid or remote thing that might actually bring more than the 1 or 2 usual members in our audience. So might be better to prepare.
Yeah, I
Well,
mean, through the chair, I was just going to say, we could look at, something town hall style where we, are in the auditorium. There would be ample space there for people, if they wanted to attend a meeting, that they could socially distance safely without too much of an issue. The only thing I would just have to double check on the current regulation around gathering in public buildings. I know there's some relief there for schools. I just want to make sure that same applies for other groups like school committees. But I think that would be the best place to do it,
Okay, thank you.
if that makes sense.
Excellent. Well, then I would entertain a motion to hold our school committee meetings starting in September on Wednesdays every other week at 7 p.m. at a location to be determined.
That motion?
Seconded.
All right. Any further discussion? Roll call vote. Dr. McCrillis,
Yes.
Mrs. Holloway,
Yes.
Mrs. Kaufman,
Yes.
Mrs. Harrington,
Yes.
and Mr. Scobie, yes. It is a vote. Thank you.
Through the chair, could I ask a question? I know that in September, will the first meeting be September 2nd? Or I'm only wondering because we have some warrant articles and that'll come up later in the meeting, but I just want to make sure that we need to get those to town hall prior to the 8th. So I was hoping to get those voted on at the September 2nd meeting. So that's all I had to say on that. But that's coming up later in the meeting, but I just wanted to make a note about September 2nd.
Okay. Thank you. And that is a vote. So moving on.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So yes, moving on, as discussed in previous meetings with respect to some changes to student handbooks as it relates to COVID. We've talked to you about bringing in supports and keeping an eye on the social and emotional safety of our students. And so in an ongoing effort to support students in the Auburn Public Schools and in concert with the Massachusetts Department of Elementary and Secondary Education's 2018 HEART Strategy for Safe and Supportive Schools, we're working to promote systems and strategies that foster safe, positive, healthy, culturally responsive, and inclusive learning environments that address students' varied needs and improve the educational outcomes for all. And DESE's focus through this initiative includes school climate and culture, social and emotional learning competencies, health, wellness, and safety, and family and community engagement. In support of DESE's initiative and based on an increased need for social and emotional support for our students, we are currently using a universal screener known as the BASC-3 Behavioral and Emotional Screening System. The acronym is BESS or BASC, depending on who's discussing it. Typically, we're doing the screening periodically throughout the school year to identify or predict students who may be at particular risk. These universal screenings give us the ability to refine and strengthen our efforts to help all of our kids by allowing us to take positive and preventative measures as early as possible. It's not a diagnostic tool. It's a screening tool that gauges potential risk and allows us to follow up with parents as necessary. So there will be language with your approval notifying parents of that in this year's student handbooks. And then we're also, as discussed last week, we're also looking to insert the face mask cloth face covering policy so parents are aware of what's allowed for masks and what's not allowed for masks.
Okay. I would entertain that motion.
I'll make that motion to approve the above mentioned to be added to all student handbooks.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Second.
Any discussion on that? Roll call vote. Dr. McCrillis,
Yes.
Mrs. Holloway,
Yes,
Mrs. Kaufman,
Yes.
Mrs. Harrington,
Yes.
and Mr. Scobie, yes. That is a vote. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
We now move on to teaching and learning.
Hey, everyone. Thank you. I apologize for the lateness of my arrival, but the commissioner seems to have hopped on our school committee schedule of meetings. So I was on a meeting with him to just see what the first few minutes were about that, just so that Mr. Hanfield and I can stay up to speed with things coming out from DESE. So I apologize for arriving late. So I just did want to share with you, I know we had talked about providing teachers with enough planning time and that kind of thing to get ready for the school year. And wanted to share with you that as of today, there have been 518 planning hours that teachers across the district have completed. Some of that being preparation for their own classroom, but much of it being preparation for training and training sessions for when the bulk of teachers arrive next week. So they've been working on creating training for teachers on Schoology and Seesaw, Zoom, Schoology, Apple TV, Nearpod, and along with working on scheduling and student placements and all of that. So I appreciate all the efforts they've put into all of that. And once teachers arrive back, we've created a nice schedule for them. So there'll be ample time in the first 5 days to receive this kind of preparatory training and to, most importantly, receive safety training by our nurses. All of our staff has gone above and beyond this summer. Our nursing staff, along with, I'd like to thank Darlene Coyle and Elaine from the Board of Health. They've been really great about talking through so much information that we've gotten from the Board of Health and from DESE around appropriate ways to manage students when they return. So all of that training will happen in those first 5 days. And then the second 5 days will be comprised of at least 2 hours each day where teachers are doing some orientation activities with students. Some of that might be virtual, some of that might be just a phone call one-to-one to connect with kids. And then the rest of their days will be allowed, they'll have the time to really dig into the planning for their specific classroom with their colleagues. So we're excited to have this time to start the school year. I'm thankful for all the teachers and staff who have stepped up around the planning for things. I just thought you'd like to know that. And as I think you already know, we have a remarkable staff and they continue to show their true colors as just being really dedicated to supporting our kids across the board. So that's my report, Mr. Scobie.
Thank you for that report, much appreciated. And yes, we did touch upon how effective and how caring our staff is a little earlier before you got here regarding the MOA and the whole back to school plan. Really, we are so fortunate. I don't
Through the
mind
chair.
repeating
Oh,
that.
sorry.
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I thought you were done.
No, that was pretty much, I like to pause in between.
Okay. I do just have one question for Dr. Chamberlain. It's specific to the older grades. I'm not sure if this would actually come through like from the virtual school training or if this is something that's come through from DESE, but how are we dealing with kids who may have been in honors programs or may have been thinking about going into or I guess how we're splitting out some of the curriculum, given that we ended last year in a completely virtual model. So has there been any guidance from DESE on how do people pick back up where they left off in March, or I guess, what is the consensus on that?
Yeah, so
For placement in particular.
yeah, so there's been some, not a lot of guidance, but some that the idea of going back is not one that serves students well. But we know that there are going to be things that are missing, right? Because we just have this whole different. So what they've really advised is that teachers need to, so teachers have been communicating throughout the closure about where kids kind of left off and what they might be missing, particularly when they came out with the powered standards that were given out during the initial closure. And what teachers have been charged to do is to look at their course as it stands and identify through there where students may hit potential gaps because of what was missed previously. And then at that point to provide a bit of a backfill. But they did provide us with some interesting studies for places like Louisiana, what Katrina hit, and kids were out of school for a long time. And what they did was they went back to where they started, kind of. And what happened was they found the gap really grew.
Oh, wow.
So they got farther and farther behind. So there were a couple of really good studies that were shared with us around that. So they encourage coursework to happen where it would normally happen, with the well awareness that there are going to be places that they're going to have to stop and kind of backfill some of the previous knowledge. So that's the approach that we're taking with that, to make sure, because the last thing we want to do is make a gap any bigger than it is, right? To help them to continue to fall behind. So I will tell you, that's a very simplistic explanation. The work of doing that is certainly not simple. But our teachers are prepared for that. So I do think that's the approach we'll be taking.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I was just curious. I know nobody's done this before.
Yeah.
So
yeah, it's tricky.
but I was just curious about that.
Good question. Any other comments?
I have one question. Beth, are the oldest students going to move from teacher to teacher, or are the teachers moving in like middle school and high school?
So middle school is not moving. Middle school is going to stay students will stay self-contained and the teachers will move. The high school has lengthened their blocks a bit, and students will be moving, but their last block of the day is going to be done remotely at home for all students. So that limits another transition to another classroom. And they've also built in very rigorous protocols related to into the classroom you sanitize, out of the classroom you sanitize, desks are going to be cleaned in between. And those kind of things that came out of primarily advisement from DESE. Becomes very tricky at the high school level because the kids don't typically stay together. They might be together with a group for math, but then very different for English, reading or history or whatever. So, we've followed the guidance they've given us, so there will be some transition. Again, the groups will be smaller, right? We'll have about half our students each time. They've built in longer times for transition between classes so that all the kids aren't in the hallways at the same time. They're kind of going to go in waves a little bit. So we're hoping to minimize the interactions, but yeah, there will be some changing at the high school level.
And one more question. I believe eighth grade math is still has a pre-algebra course. Is that still going to happen? Or are they
Yeah.
going to all just have the same math?
No, I think they're working that out. That's going to kind of be hinged on student placement, right? So how they make those initial groups, I think. But yes, all those core subjects are still going to be offered. What might struggle a little bit is some of the unified arts classes, right? Given that, but they're still working that out. So we're really trying to give kids the same experience they would have always had, certainly related to any core instruction.
Thank you.
So actually just one follow-up question then just to that about the unified arts, because I haven't seen anything in the documents, but I know there's a lot of documents going out there. So do the kids still get to do gym in any capacity, or is that one of the ones that just got automatically put to the back burner for now?
Well, they can do it, but they can't do it in a way that resembles gym from last year.
Well, sure. But is it going to are we trying to still work it into the kind of the curriculum K to 12, or I just didn't, I know the state asks, or maybe it's us that we try to get, especially in the high school, kids need to take at least one try of that a year.
So K to 5, K to 5 is not impacted. They're going to primarily get all of their specials, as we call them at that level, remotely. So they'll be able to do all of the things that they do, and that's going to work out okay. At the middle school and high school level, they are looking at modified kind of things. So it may look more like there may be more of an emphasis on health. There are things they can do outside, but they really discourage anything that causes what they call excessive respiration.
Okay.
So, they may be able to walk the track as long as they're appropriately separated, may be able to do some yoga, they may be able to do some modified kind of calisthenics kind of thing. But we really, and that has to be also, they hope for more like 10 feet of spacing if there is any kind of increased respiration associated with the activity.
Right.
So there are some things. So the PE staff and the health staff is working on that. It's not going to look like it was, but there will still be that encouragement and emphasis on health and well-being and movement and fitness.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
That was really my last question.
Chair, a couple of questions on that. In terms of like gym recess for younger kids, is that the same there? No running, 10 feet apart, that kind of thing? Okay. And then at the high school level, are the children or the kids gonna have the same classes all the time there and then different classes at home? Like all kids will have math live and a different type of class virtually? Is that how they're planning it, or?
Yeah, so it'll be the same class, but what they're doing is almost in some ways kind of like a flipped classroom on the days that the kids aren't in. Because what they want to do is keep all the kids on the same pace, right? So when they're in person, they're getting that interaction with the teacher. Some of the bigger assignments are happening at home on the remote days for either group. What they are going to be doing, though, is doing a check-in with the kids that are at home at the start of every class to say, okay, you're home, you have this assignment, do you have any questions? This is what we're working on here in school today. Okay, you're good, you're on your way. Right, rather than having that, we know we can't do that live streaming class for an extensive period of time, but we want to keep those kids tethered to the classroom teacher as much as we possibly can without it being too much of a load on the classroom teacher.
Any other comments or questions?
The only other thing and this isn't in here, I just want to share is we've had 2 town hall meetings so far. We had special education Monday night and Bryn Mawr School last night. We have Swiss in the middle school today. Swiss is at 6, the middle school's at 4. The response has been tremendous. And the questions that people have had been terrific. We've had a good turnout at the 2 so far. Mrs. Reedy and Mrs. Mahan did a terrific job. I kind of moderated the questions for them so that they didn't have to kind of keep track of that. But just awesome. It was so good. And the questions from the families were so good. And one we hadn't planned for, but are now planning for, we're going to have a town hall with our nurses. Probably not until next week. Because in some of these, they've had these questions and so many rabbit holes you go down when you start to talk about what might happen if, and what might happen if, and what might happen if, those kind of things, that we've kind of put those off to the nurses, and the nurses are more than happy to do that. So they're going to do a staff presentation early next week once all the staff return. But then after that, they're also preparing for a parent town hall so that all of those really detailed health questions can also be answered.
That's really great to hear. I think that is probably weighing on a lot of people's minds. I think you might see some people then even still change their minds about the decision that they've made, maybe for the better in terms of, and I know that that's going to exceed the 828 requested decision point, but hopefully that would be for the better and get more kids into the building. But
the one thing, if you get questions, and I keep, even last night in the Bryn Mawr presentation, I keep referring people back to that reopening and readiness guide, because much of the information that the nurses are going to present are going to it comes from that document, because that's, we're trying to make one guide for things so that we're all on the same page when we ask these questions, and the nurses from building to building. So I referred people back to that too. And it's not riveting reading, but it's very important, and it answers a lot of the questions that people come up with. It really does. It's all in that document. So I've put, if between now and then people have questions for you, I would guide them back to that document, because a lot of what they need to know is there.
okay, thank you. Yeah, I think some of it even just comes down to metrics for what is it going to take for a school closure to happen, et cetera. And now we have the rapid testing that was rolled out, or the mobile rapid testing that Governor Baker announced last week. So I think there's a lot of different things that are feeding into this new surge of questions about what our procedures are. So
yeah, and through the chair, what I would say is, this continues to be an evolving target. The information and original thoughts from June have changed in July, have changed through August, most recently in the last 2 weeks, and they're going to continue to evolve, I think, as we know more about this. I will tell you that, with respect to, it's a great point you just make with respect to the governor's announcement of rapid response teams, that's been added to our readiness guide. So if people go in there, they'll find a link to that. I put it in just the other day. And so those are the types of updates that we're talking about that as we make them, that will bring them to your attention so that you're aware that they're there. So there's a lot there, but I will say in having been in attendance at both of the town hall meetings, as Dr. Chamberlain said, the questions from the parents are spot on. They're terrific questions. And we have the answers. And that's the part that I think is in a bad situation, I think is really, really important to underscore that where these questions are coming, we have the answers. We have an outstanding school nursing corps. We have some new members joining us for the fall. And I can't say enough about Darlene Coyle and the Auburn Department of Public Health. She has been phenomenal to work with, extremely collaborative, and will spend as much time with us, as necessary. So families should feel very comfortable and confident in the plans we have put forward, the hours and hours that we have spent. And this week was an important week for us internally. We knew that, because it was going to be, okay, what are the questions and do we have the answers? And thus far we do. And those that there may be a couple of, uncertainties about, we will work over the next 3 weeks and get that stuff ironed out. But it's a solid plan, and the medical piece, I feel, is very solid.
Okay, great, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for that report. And now we move on to business and financial.
Good afternoon, everyone. I've provided in your packet a year-to-date budget report for FY21 dated August 24th. I'd be happy to answer any questions if there are any on that. Seeing none. Okay. Moving on to budget transfers. I have a listing of budget transfers that I've also placed in your packet dated August 24th with changes that I put forth. Our payroll manager, Liz Lynch just finished doing the payroll, which enters all the teachers and the IAs and the ABA staff for the 26 pays. So this will make some of those adjustments to the budget to reflect increases and for the year, if there are any. And so there are a few that are between series that I'd like your approval. The others are just within the same series. So if I could have an approval for the ones between series, that would be great. And I'd be happy to answer any questions as well.
I would entertain that motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the transfer between the series as presented by the business manager.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Again,
Any discussion? Roll call vote. Dr. McCrillis,
Yes.
Mrs. Holloway,
Yes,
Mrs. Kaufman,
yes,
Mrs. Harrington,
Yes.
and Mr. Scobie, yes. It is a vote. Moving on.
The last thing I wanted to bring to your attention was that we had a donation to our food service school lunch debt account. We received a check in the amount of $50. Mrs. King brought forward to me from Miss Donna Bacon, and that'll be deposited. But I want to acknowledge that this is the third time that Mrs. Bacon has donated, and we are very thankful for her generosity, and we will be sending a letter of thanks to her for that. So I'd like to have a motion to accept the donation.
I would entertain that motion.
I'll make the motion to
I'll make
accept
that
the
motion.
donation.
to accept with gratitude the donation.
All right.
A second.
All right.
Okay.
We have a second. We have a motion. Excellent. Any discussion on that?
Much. It's great.
No, thank you
One
to Ms.
comment.
Bacon.
Donna Bacon, whom someone I know,
Very
thank you very
kind.
much. And she doesn't have any children, so this is extra nice of her.
Absolutely. Roll call vote. Dr. McCrillis,
Yes.
Mrs. Holloway,
Yes,
Mrs. Kaufman,
yes,
Mrs. Harrington,
Yes.
and Mr. Scobie, yes. It is a vote. Thank you.
And lastly, as I mentioned just earlier, I was hoping to, the town is getting ready to do the fall town meeting, and that's scheduled for the towards the end of October. So they've asked the school department to come forward with warrant articles that we'd like to place on the meeting agenda. And we have a couple formulated already. I was hoping to bring them to this meeting, but we're waiting for some information from Mr. Fahey's been working on some information on one of the last piece of it. So I was hoping to have a meeting next week so that we could vote on that as a school committee and get your approval to move that on to the town, because our deadline is September 8th to have all things submitted to the town. So that would be my only comment. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Dr. Hanfield, how does next week look on your schedule?
So we're looking at September the 2nd. Yeah, I mean, if you wanted to go back to September the 2nd at 7 is what I'm hearing, and then we would meet bi-weekly thereafter.
Yeah, I think that would make sense. That would put us at the beginning of the month and mid-month.
Yep. No, that makes great sense to me. That's fine. I don't know, I'm not sure.
Question. Sorry, through the chair, is that going to be a Zoom meeting? Because I don't know if I'll be in town.
I
We could
think
do-
we-
If we needed to do one more Zoom before we start in person, I don't think that's a problem unless anybody disagrees. I don't know.
I can make it work in person too, if that's easier. Maybe we should just start in person. That's fine. I'll get my mask ready.
okay, why don't we do that then? We'll stick with the original schedule that we agreed upon. So Wednesday, the 2nd at 7 PM. Location to be determined.
Somewhere,
Very much.
Sure.
somewhere.
Yeah, that's,
Excellent.
that's fine. Yeah, that works. That's fine. Yeah, and I will, yeah, I will look at the high school space and see where we might meet. I'll just have to talk to Auburn Cable TV and see if they have a preference just for video hookups and things like that. I know they've made it work in the presentation room before. I think they're okay in the auditorium at the high school.
Yeah, I
So
think-
I'll just double check with Mr. Hugo if he has a preference in room.
I think even the presentation room is adequate
Sure.
distance for us.
Yep. No, they do.
Whatever's easier for them and whatever is not too much of a hassle for Mr. Longchamp and whatever he has going on.
Sure.
Excellent.
I'll check on that. I'll get back to you.
Okay. Is there anything else, Dr. Hanfield?
No, thank you. I think that's it for this meeting.
All right. I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Make that motion?
Do I have a second?
Second,
Roll call vote. Dr. McCrillis,
Yes.
Mrs. Holloway, Mrs.
Yes.
Kaufman,
Yes.
Mrs. Harrington,
Yes.
and Mr. Scobie, yes. That is a vote. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
Thanks,
Yeah.
everyone. Bye.
Take care.
Take care.
bye.
Well.